my institute was called the Maine Digital Humanities Institute, which I offered as an online institute over 7 weeks using the platform Slack. And I did this because I'm basically a one-woman show. I work in a community college that is very thinly staffed, lots of part-time faculty, people wearing many, many hats, and it's a very energetic place where people like to take on initiatives, but because everybody's taking on all these initiatives, you know, they have to pick and choose, and so I was kind of on my own. And I knew that I could do the online piece on my own because I have 20 years experience teaching online, and I had become familiar with Slack through a couple of graduate courses I'd taken. And I also knew that the time when I was offering my institute, January to March, I had a pretty good chance of getting participation and interest because, let's face it, that's a really good time to sit on a couch in Maine. So I recruited participants for my institute through a variety of means at my own institution, and also using a listserv and building upon connections that I'd made through a previous NEH grant I'd had to help develop the local capacity for public history in my area, York County, Maine. And I also presented cards for the Institute at a presentation I gave at a statewide conference of museums. And I was able to get 11 participants from a variety of backgrounds, including some faculty and staff at my institution, a lot of people from the museum community, and what I think is somewhat unique, 2 folks who were living and working on offshore islands in Maine. So, we started out with some general exchange of information about what we were doing and projects that we were interested in, and also kind of looking at some of the easy-to-use, out-of-the-box tools that some of which might be proprietary. And then we moved into some of the CUNY lessons, starting with the command line. I knew that from my experience in teaching online, I knew that to sustain the engagement in the course, it would be really important to stay connected with people and to have people develop a sense of connection with each other. And in Maine, it's a very large state geographically, but it's a small state professionally. And you know, people like to forge connections, and so there was a very collegial air from the beginning. And one thing I like about Slack is it has an alert mechanism that quickly on my phone I could tell if somebody had a question, so I could get back to them right away. Now, since I was kind of a neophyte, leading even people who were ultra neophytes, I didn't always have the answer to their question, but I knew that if I just got back to them, like, I'm going to answer your question, we're going to find the answer, that was going to kind of keep them engaged. And so it was a very intensive 7 weeks with that every day, you know, a few times a day there'd be that alert on the phone, and there was a lot of back and forth with the CUNY message board to try to solve some little technical glitches or little places in the curriculum where it might not be quite clear if you were only relying on the written word to complete the tutorial as opposed to a classroom environment where an instructor can fill in some of the gaps. But by the end of the 7 weeks, 5 people completed the institute, and which is about what I expected. I went in hoping that half of the folks would complete. And even for those who didn't complete, for example, there was someone who's a key person at the Maine State Library in some of their digital initiatives. She wasn't able to complete the course, but she knew kind of what it was about. It's kind of tucked in her back pocket, you know, as Maine moves forward. The completers is not a statistically significant sample, but they were a mix of what I would call the youngins and the baby boomers. And I will say the youngins took more readily to the tutorials, but everyone, you know, the baby boomers stuck with it. And it was kind of interesting because I think the older folks, we had come of age with DOS and the precursor to Windows, so we knew that there was something behind the screen. we just didn't want to go there because it looked really complicated. Whereas some of the younger participants, they were the native GUI people, and so they didn't even know that there was something behind the screen in some cases. So, you know, it was fun for them to sort of dig in and see, you know, use the command line, work a little bit with the QGIS and the HTML, the CSS, and that sort of thing. The general outcome, I think, was similar to the way I felt at the end of the CUNY Institute, which was, well, this is interesting, this is cool. What am I going to do with this now? Will I use this? And I think that after about a year plus of working with these tools, I'm still not like using them on a regular basis, but I now have a better sense of how I would use them and why. And for example, I'm working on a project where I'm collecting data on immigrants that were required to register with the state of Maine on the eve of World War II. And I know that I can use certain tools in the command line to kind of clear up that data, to manipulate it, and so forth. And so my participants in my institute may not be at that place yet, but I think that one thing they learned is that this is not rocket science. The process demystified some of the technical challenges, and that, you know, the command line isn't some foreign language that they can't possibly understand. And I think just getting that understanding is valuable and helps to carry people forward in their work in digital humanities.